Millionaire visits orphanage and forgets his wallet. What the orphan did left him horrified. The imposing figure of Maxwell Blackwood was reflected in the enormous windows of his office on the 50th floor of Blackwood Enterprises Tower in the heart of New York City. His eyes, cold as steel, scrutinized the urban horizon, while his mind calculated the next moves that would take his financial empire to new heights. At 45 years old, Maxwell was the very image of success, multi-millionaire, attractive and powerful. However, something was missing in his life, a void that not even he could identify. "Mr. Blackwood, your assistant is here with today's schedule," announced his secretary's voice through the intercom. "Send her in," Maxwell replied, without taking his gaze from the window. Sarah, his efficient 28-year-old assistant, entered with a firm step, her tablet in hand and a determined expression on her face. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood. We have a busy day ahead." Maxwell turned, his face a mask of indifference. "Go ahead, Sarah. What do we have today?" "At 10, sir, you have a video conference with the investors from Shanghai. At 12:30, lunch with the Secretary of Commerce. And at 3... Sarah paused as if hesitating to continue. Maxwell raised an eyebrow. "Well?" "At 3, the visit to Hope and Life Orphanage is scheduled. It's part of the new corporate social responsibility campaign designed by the Public Relations Department." The businessman let out a barely perceptible sigh. "Ah, yes. The charity campaign. Is it really necessary for me to be present?" Sarah nodded firmly. "Yes, sir. The PR team insists that your personal presence will have a significant impact on the company's image. Plus, the media will be there to cover the event." "Very well," Maxwell conceded, his tone lacking enthusiasm. "Make sure the donation check is ready and the speech is brief. I don't want to spend more time than necessary in that place." The assistant frowned slightly but refrained from commenting. "Of course, sir. Everything will be prepared." As Sarah withdrew, Maxwell turned his attention to the documents on his desk. The figures and graphs were his true language, the only one he really understood and appreciated. For him, the world was divided into assets and liabilities, into profitable investments and necessary expenses. And this visit to the orphanage was nothing more than another necessary expense, a lesser evil to maintain the public image of Blackwood Enterprises. The hours flew by between meetings and multi-million-dollar decisions. Before he knew it, Maxwell found himself in the back seat of his luxury car on the way to the orphanage. His driver, Frank, a middle-aged man who had been working for him for years, observed him through the rearview mirror with a mixture of respect and concern. "Everything all right, Mr. Blackwood?" Frank dared to ask, noticing the tension on his boss's face. Maxwell looked up from his smartphone. "Yes, Frank. I just want to get this over with as soon as possible." The driver nodded but couldn't help adding, "You know, sir, my niece volunteers at that orphanage. She says the kids are incredible, full of life and hope, despite everything." For a moment, something seemed to flicker in Maxwell's eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "I'm sure they are, Frank, but we're not here to make friends. It's an act of charity, nothing more." The rest of the journey passed in silence. When they finally arrived at Hope and Life Orphanage, Maxwell was surprised to see that the building, though modest, was well maintained. Colorful gardens adorned the entrance, and children's laughter could be heard from inside. Maxwell got out of the car, adjusting his tie and mentally preparing himself for the cameras he could already see at the entrance. The orphanage director, a kind-looking man named Robert Thompson, greeted him with a genuine smile. "Mr. Blackwood, it's an honor to have you here," said Robert, extending his hand. Maxwell shook it briefly, his face a mask of rehearsed cordiality. "The honor is mine, Mr. Thompson. Blackwood Enterprises is committed to the well-being of the community." As they entered the building, followed by a retinue of assistants and journalists, Maxwell couldn't help but notice the colorful drawings adorning the walls, the carefully arranged toys on the shelves, and the aroma of home-cooked food wafting through the air. It was a warm, almost homely environment, so different from the cold hallways of his company. The visit proceeded as planned. Maxwell toured the facilities, listened to the director's explanations about the educational and development programs, and finally came the moment to hand over the donation check. Cameras flashed when Maxwell, with a perfectly rehearsed smile, handed the check to Director Thompson. "On behalf of all the children and staff of Hope and Life, we greatly thank you for your generosity, Mr. Blackwood," said the director, visibly moved. Maxwell nodded, repeating the words he had memorized. It is our duty as a leading company to contribute to the well-being of those most in need. We hope this donation will help provide a better future for these children. After the formal act, and while the journalists prepared for the round of questions, Director Thompson suggested, Mr. Blackwood, would you like to meet some of our children? They're in the recreation room and would be delighted to greet you. For a moment, Maxwell hesitated. It wasn't in the program, and he had already fulfilled his part of the show. However, aware of the cameras still surrounding him, he nodded with a forced smile. Of course, it would be a pleasure. He followed the director to a large room full of color and life. Children of various ages were playing, reading, or simply talking among themselves. Upon seeing the adults enter, some fell silent, observing with curiosity the man in the elegant suit. A small girl, no more than 10 years old, approached shyly. She had black hair tied in 2 braids and large expressive eyes that looked at Maxwell with a mixture of curiosity and hope. Hello, sir, said the girl in a soft voice. My name is Emily. Are you the man who's come to help us? Maxwell, taken by surprise, found himself speechless for a moment. Finally, he managed to respond. Yes, I am. My name is Maxwell Blackwood. Emily smiled, revealing a missing tooth. Thank you for coming, Mr. Blackwood. Would you like to see the drawing I made today? Before Maxwell could respond, the girl had already run to fetch her artwork. She returned with a colorful paper that she proudly extended towards the businessman. It was a simple but lively drawing, showing what appeared to be a large, happy family. It's beautiful, Emily, said Maxwell, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. Emily's smile widened even more. Do you really like it? You can keep it if you want. For a brief instant, something stirred inside Maxwell. The innocence and generosity of that small gesture disconcerted him. However, he quickly regained his composure, aware of the cameras capturing every moment. You're very kind, Emily, but I think this drawing will be better here where everyone can enjoy it, he replied, returning the paper to her. The visit continued for a few more minutes, with Maxwell exchanging brief words with some children and orphanage staff. Finally, it was time to leave. As he said goodbye to Director Thompson and prepared to face a final round of photos and questions from journalists, Maxwell didn't notice that he had left his black leather wallet on the table in the recreation room. He got into his car, exhaling a sigh of relief as he closed the door. Back to the office, Frank, he ordered his driver. As the vehicle drove away from the orphanage, Maxwell tried to shake off the strange feeling that was invading him. He had done his duty, he had done his act of charity. Why then did he feel that inexplicable emptiness in his chest? What he didn't know was that at that very moment, little Emily was discovering the forgotten wallet, an action that was about to change the course of many lives, including her own. The afternoon sun filtered through the windows of the recreation room at Hope and Life Orphanage, bathing the scattered toys and colorful drawings adorning the walls with its golden light. The children, still excited from the visit of the famous businessman Maxwell Blackwood, were chatting animatedly about the event. However, in a corner of the room, little Emily remained silent, her big eyes fixed on an object that shone on the table, the black leather wallet that Mr. Blackwood had forgotten. Emily approached cautiously, as if the wallet were a wild animal that might jump at any moment. With trembling fingers, she took it in her hands, surprised by its softness and the aroma of fine leather it gave off. It was an object that screamed luxury and power, so different from anything she had touched before. "What do you have there, Emily?" asked Jason, a 12-year-old boy who had quietly approached. Emily started, clutching the wallet to her chest. It's Mr. Blackwood's wallet. He forgot it here." The news spread like wildfire among the children. Within minutes, Emily found herself surrounded by a dozen curious faces, all eager to take a look at the forgotten treasure. "Open it," suggested Sophie, a girl Emily's age with eyes bright with excitement. Emily hesitated. She knew it wasn't right to rummage through someone else's belongings, but the curiosity was overwhelming. With a sigh of resignation, she opened the wallet. The interior was a display of luxury: golden credit cards, carefully folded high-denomination bills, and an ID with a photo of Maxwell Blackwood looking seriously at the camera. "Look at all that money," exclaimed Michael, the oldest of the group at 14. "We could buy so many things with that." A silence fell over the group, each child lost in thought, imagined what they could do with that money. New clothes, toys, books, maybe even a trip outside the orphanage. It was Emily who broke the silence. Her voice, though soft, had a tone of determination that made everyone look at her. "I have an idea," she said, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and excitement. The children moved closer, forming a tight circle around Emily. She took a breath and began to speak, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Mr. Blackwood came here today, gave us money and left. But did any of you feel like he really saw us? That he really cared about us?" The faces around her showed a mixture of confusion and understanding. Emily continued, "I propose we take this money and use it. Not to steal it, but to show Mr. Blackwood who we really are." A murmur of amazement ran through the group. "But Emily," Jason intervened, "that would be stealing. We'd get into trouble." Emily shook her head, her braids swinging. "No, it wouldn't be. We're going to return everything to him. But before that, we're going to use it to be normal kids for a day. We'll buy new clothes, some toys, maybe even go to the movies. And then when we return the wallet, we'll show Mr. Blackwood what it really means to help someone." Emily's proposal floated in the air, heavy with possibilities and dangers. The children looked at each other, undecided. Sophie was the first to speak. I think Emily is right. They always treat us as if we were invisible. This could be our chance to be seen." Gradually, the other children began to nod, infected by the audacity of the idea. Even the most skeptical found themselves considering the proposal. "But how will we do it?" asked Michael, always practical. "We can't just leave the orphanage and start spending money." Emily smiled, a plan forming in her mind. "I have an idea. Tomorrow is Saturday, and they always let us go to the park. We can sneak away then." The plan began to take shape. They decided that Michael, being the oldest, would keep the money. Sophie would be in charge of distracting the caretakers in the park. The other children would have specific tasks. Some would buy clothes, others toys, and a small group would be in charge of getting movie tickets. While the children discussed the details, Emily moved away for a moment, approaching the window. She looked at the sunset sky, a mixture of emotions stirring inside her. She knew that what they were planning wasn't right, but deep in her heart, she felt it was necessary. Maybe, just maybe, this would make someone really see them, understand that they were more than just numbers in a charity statistic. Suddenly, the voice of Mrs. Johnson, one of the caretakers, resonated in the hallway. "Children, it's dinner time." The group dispersed quickly, with Michael hiding the wallet under his shirt. Before leaving the room, they all exchanged knowing looks. The plan was in motion. That night, while the other children slept, Emily remained awake in her bed, her mind spinning. Were they doing the right thing? What if they got caught? But every time she doubted, she remembered Maxwell Blackwood's distant look, the way he had rejected her drawing, and her determination strengthened. Across the city, in his luxurious penthouse, Maxwell Blackwood was preparing for bed. He checked his phone one last time, responding to emails and verifying stock quotes. The visit to the orphanage was already a distant memory, barely a footnote in his busy day. However, just before turning off the light, a fleeting image crossed his mind. Emily's smiling face offering him her drawing. For a moment, he felt a pang of, what was it? Guilt? Nostalgia? He shook his head, dismissing the thought. He had more important things to think about. What Maxwell didn't know was that in less than 24 hours, that girl and her bold plan would shake the foundations of his carefully constructed world. The next morning, Hope and Life Orphanage woke up with an unusual energy. The children, especially Emily's group, seemed to vibrate with contained excitement. They ate breakfast quickly, anxious for the time to go to the park to arrive. When they finally went out, under the supervision of 2 caretakers, the plan was set in motion. Sophie began to act, feigning a stomachache that required urgent attention. While the caretakers were distracted, Emily, Michael, and a small group slipped away, blending in with the crowd in the park. With hearts beating 1,000 times a minute, but with unwavering determination, the children ventured into the city. For the first time in their lives, they had the power to choose, to be like any other child. They didn't know that their actions were about to trigger a series of events that would change not only their lives, but also Maxwell Blackwood's, in ways that none of them could imagine. Meanwhile, in his office, Maxwell began another day of negotiations and multi-million-dollar decisions, completely oblivious to the whirlwind that was approaching. The forgotten wallet, which at that moment he would consider a minor nuisance, was about to become the catalyst for a profound transformation in his life. The bustle of the city enveloped Emily and her friends as they ventured through the streets of New York, their hearts pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. For these children, raised within the walls of the orphanage, the outside world was a maze of unknown possibilities and dangers. Michael, the oldest of the group, took the initiative. "Well, where do we start?" he asked, his voice betraying a slight tremor, despite his attempt to appear confident. Emily, her eyes bright with determination, pointed to a colorful clothing store across the street. "There," she said firmly. "First, let's dress like the kids we see on TV." Cautiously, they crossed the street, marveling at the shop windows full of mannequins with elegant and modern clothes. As they entered the store, they were greeted by air conditioning and the scent of new fabric, a completely new experience for them. A saleswoman approached, her smile faltering slightly upon seeing the group of children clearly out of place. "Can I help you?" she asked, with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. It was Sophie who stepped forward, her voice surprisingly confident. "Yes, please. We want to buy new clothes." "As many as we can." The saleswoman blinked, confused, but the flash of bills that Michael took out of the wallet quickly dispelled her doubts. "Of course," she replied, her attitude instantly changing to one of helpful enthusiasm. "Where would you like to start?" What followed was a whirlwind of colors, textures, and styles. Emily tried on dresses that twirled when she spun. Sophie found a leather jacket that made her feel invincible, and the boys marveled at sneakers that seemed able to make them fly. As they tried on the clothes, Emily couldn't help but notice her reflection in the mirror. For the first time, she saw a girl who didn't look like an orphan, but someone who could belong to any happy family. A silent tear rolled down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away, determined not to let sadness cloud this moment of joy. They left the store with bags full of new clothes, feeling transformed. "What now?" asked Jason, clearly excited by the adventure. "Toys!" exclaimed little Peter, the youngest of the group at just 8 years old. The others nodded enthusiastically and headed to a nearby toy store. The toy store was a paradise of colors and sounds. The children ran from one aisle to another, marveling at the variety of games and toys they had never dreamed of owning. Emily stopped in front of an art set with paints and brushes of every imaginable color. Her eyes lit up as she imagined the drawings she could create. Michael, always thinking of the group, suggested buying board games that everyone could enjoy together at the orphanage. Sophie found a beautiful talking doll, something she had always wanted but never dared to ask for. With arms laden with bags and hearts full of a joy they had never experienced before, the group went out onto the street again. The afternoon sun was beginning to descend, reminding them that their time of freedom was limited. "We still have money left," observed Michael, checking the contents of the wallet. "What else can we do?" It was then that Emily saw the poster for a nearby cinema. "A movie!" she exclaimed. "I've always wanted to see a movie in the theater." The idea was met with cheers of approval. They hurried to the cinema, choosing an animated film that promised adventure and laughter. To their surprise, the cashier didn't even blink when a group of children bought tickets without adult supervision. Sitting in the darkness of the movie theater with popcorn and sodas, another luxury they had never tasted, the children immersed themselves in a world of fantasy and color. Emily, seated between Sophie and Jason, felt a warmth in her chest that she couldn't explain. For a moment she forgot she was an orphan, that this freedom was temporary. In that instant, she was simply a child enjoying a movie with her friends. Meanwhile, across the city, Maxwell Blackwood was immersed in an important business meeting. His mind was occupied with figures, projections, and market strategies. However, from time to time, a fleeting thought about his visit to the orphanage crossed his mind, like a passing cloud in a clear sky. Back at the cinema, when the lights came on and the credits began to roll, reality hit Emily and her friends. Their dream day was coming to an end. "I have to go back," said Michael, his voice tinged with sadness and resignation. Emily nodded, but before they could move, she noticed a photo booth in the cinema lobby. "Wait," she said. "One last thing." They squeezed into the small booth, laughing and making faces as the camera captured 4 photographs. When the photo strips came out, each took one, a tangible memory of their day of freedom. With heavy hearts but full of new memories, the group set out on the way back to the orphanage. Emily looked at the strip of photos in her hand, a bittersweet smile on her lips. She knew that what they had done wasn't right, but for one day, they had been normal children. They had been seen and treated like any other. As they walked, Emily began to plan how they would return the wallet to Maxwell Blackwood. She wanted him to understand, to see beyond the numbers and donations. She wanted him to see the real children behind the facade of the orphanage. What Emily didn't know was that her actions had already set in motion a series of events that would change not only her life, but also Maxwell Blackwood's. The businessman, at that moment finishing his meeting and preparing for another night of loneliness in his luxurious penthouse, had no idea that he was about to receive a life lesson from the most unexpected source. As the sun set over New York City, painting the sky orange and pink, Emily and her friends snuck back into the park, blending in with the other orphanage children just in time for the return. They carried their treasures hidden under their old clothes, their hearts beating with the excitement of their shared secret. That night, in the quietness of the dormitory, Emily took out the strip of photos from under her pillow. Looking at the smiling faces of her friends, she knew that, whatever happened, this day would be etched in her memory forever. With a sigh, she put the photo away and closed her eyes, her mind already working on how they would face the next day and the consequences of their actions. Miles away, Maxwell Blackwood was preparing for bed, oblivious to the emotional whirlwind that was about to enter his ordered and controlled life. Fate, with the help of a brave little girl, was about to teach him a lesson that no business school could have imparted. The next morning dawned with a palpable tension at Hope and Life Orphanage. Emily and her friends woke up with a mixture of excitement and anxiety, aware that their adventure from the previous day couldn't remain a secret for long. Meanwhile, in Maxwell Blackwood's luxurious penthouse, the businessman was preparing for another day of work. He was adjusting his tie in front of the mirror when he noticed something unusual: the absence of his black leather wallet in the inner pocket of his jacket. He frowned, trying to remember where he had last seen it. "Sarah?" he called his assistant on the phone. "Do you remember if I had my wallet when we left the orphanage yesterday?" Sarah's voice sounded worried on the other end of the line. "I'm not sure, Mr. Blackwood. Do you want me to call the orphanage to ask?" Maxwell hesitated for a moment. The idea of dealing with the orphanage again produced an inexplicable discomfort. "No, I'll handle it," he finally responded. "Cancel my morning appointments. I'll go to the orphanage personally." At Hope and Life, breakfast was proceeding with apparent normality, but the whispers and knowing looks between Emily and her group didn't go unnoticed by Mrs. Johnson, one of the most attentive caretakers. "Emily, is everything all right?" Mrs. Johnson asked, approaching the table where the girl was eating in silence. Emily looked up, struggling to maintain her calm. "Yes, Mrs. Johnson, everything's perfect," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Before the caretaker could inquire further, Director Thompson's voice resonated through the speakers. "Attention, please. Mr. Maxwell Blackwood is on his way. Apparently he forgot something during his visit yesterday. I want everyone to behave in the best possible manner." The announcement fell like a bomb among Emily and her friends. They looked at each other, panic evident on their faces. Michael, always the most pragmatic, whispered, "We have to return the wallet before he gets here." Emily nodded, her mind working at full speed. "I'll do it," she said with determination. "You all act normal." Taking advantage of the general confusion that followed the announcement, Emily slipped away to the dormitory. With trembling hands, she took the wallet from its hiding place and, on impulse, put inside the strip of photos they had taken the day before. Then she ran towards the director's office. Meanwhile, Maxwell Blackwood's car was pulling up in front of the orphanage. The businessman got out of the vehicle, his face a mask of indifference that hid growing irritation. He didn't like wasting time, and he certainly didn't like the idea of returning to this place that provoked feelings he couldn't or didn't want to understand. In the director's office, Emily knocked timidly on the door. "Come in," Mr. Thompson's voice was heard. The girl entered, holding the wallet against her chest as if it were a shield. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "I found this yesterday after Mr. Blackwood left. I wanted to return it, but..." The director looked at her with a mixture of relief and concern. "Emily, why didn't you give it to me immediately?" he asked, his tone more curious than accusatory. Before Emily could respond, the door burst open, revealing the imposing figure of Maxwell Blackwood. His eyes fell first on the director and then on Emily, vaguely recognizing her from his previous visit. "Mr. Blackwood?" The director stood up, clearly nervous. How timely, just now. But Maxwell interrupted him, his gaze fixed on the wallet Emily was holding. "I see you found my property," he said coldly. "I hope everything is in order." Emily, gathering all her courage, stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, her voice trembling slightly. We wanted to show you something." Maxwell raised an eyebrow, his irritation giving way to slight curiosity. "Show me what exactly?" With shaking hands, Emily opened the wallet and took out the strip of photos. The images showed the children smiling, making faces, just being kids. "This is what we wanted you to see," she said, extending the photos towards the businessman. Maxwell took the photos, confused. He looked at the images and then at Emily, his mind trying to process what he was seeing. "I don't understand," he finally said. "What does this mean?" Emily took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Mr. Blackwood, when you came yesterday, you looked at us but didn't see us. Nobody really sees us. We're more than numbers on a donation sheet. We're children who want to be seen, who want to feel like we belong somewhere." Emily's words fell like lightning on Maxwell's conscience. For the first time in years, he found himself speechless, looking alternately at the photos and the determined face of the girl in front of him. Director Thompson, sensing the tension in the air, intervened. "Mr. Blackwood, I assure you this is not what it seems. We will take appropriate disciplinary measures and—" But Maxwell raised a hand, silencing him. His gaze remained fixed on Emily. "Continue," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "I want to hear more." Emily, encouraged by this unexpected reaction, began to speak. She told him about their plan, about how they had used the money to experience a day as normal children. She talked about the new clothes, the toys, the movie at the cinema, but above all she talked about how they felt, seen, valued, normal. As Emily spoke, something began to change in Maxwell's face. The mask of indifference cracked, revealing an emotion that not even he could name. For the first time in a long time, he was truly listening, truly seeing. When Emily finished her story, a heavy silence fell over the office. Director Thompson seemed to be holding his breath, waiting for the explosion of anger from the powerful businessman. But the explosion never came. Instead, Maxwell Blackwood did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He knelt in front of Emily, placing himself at her level, and said in a broken voice, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. You're right, I didn't see you. But now I'm seeing you." At that moment, something changed in Maxwell Blackwood's heart. The ice wall he had built around his emotions began to melt. He looked at Emily, then at the director, and finally said, "I think we need to have a long conversation about how we can improve things here." As the morning sun flooded the office, illuminating the faces of Emily, Maxwell, and Director Thompson, a new era began for Hope and Life Orphanage, an era in which children would not only be seen, but truly understood and valued. And for Maxwell Blackwood, this was the beginning of a journey of rediscovery, a journey that would lead him to confront his past, question his values, and perhaps find a purpose beyond numbers and profits. The days following the encounter in the director's office were a whirlwind of emotions and changes at Hope and Life Orphanage. Maxwell Blackwood, against all odds, had decided to personally involve himself in the daily life of the orphanage, a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. On Monday morning, a week after the wallet incident, Maxwell arrived at the orphanage dressed casually, something unusual for him. He wore jeans and a simple shirt, as if trying to shed his corporate armor. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," Director Thompson greeted him, still bewildered by this new Maxwell. "The children are having breakfast. Would you like to join them?" Maxwell nodded, following the director to the dining hall. As he entered, a sudden silence fell over the room. Dozens of curious eyes fixed on him, some with fear, others with hope. Emily, sitting at a table with her friends, was the first to break the silence. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," she said with a shy smile. "Good morning, Emily," Maxwell replied, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it before. "Good morning, everyone," he added, addressing the rest of the children. Gradually, the murmur of conversations returned to fill the dining hall. Maxwell served himself a plate of the same food the children were eating, and to everyone's surprise sat down at Emily's table with her friends. "May I join you?" he asked, his tone almost timid. The children nodded, still too surprised to speak. Michael, always the bravest, was the first to break the ice. "Mr. Blackwood, why are you here?" Maxwell looked at his plate for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "I'm here because I want to learn, I want to understand. I want to really see, as Emily asked me to do." Sophie, sitting next to Emily, dared to ask, "Aren't you angry with us anymore about the wallet?" A sad smile crossed Maxwell's face. "No, Sophie, I'm not angry. I'm grateful. You made me realize something very important that I had forgotten." Meanwhile, in the main office of Blackwood Enterprises, Sarah, Maxwell's assistant, was dealing with an avalanche of calls and emails. The sudden absence of the CEO had caused chaos in the corporate agenda. "No, Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Blackwood is not available at the moment," Sarah explained for the umpteenth time. "Yes, I understand that the merger is important, but..." Frustrated, Sarah hung up the phone and leaned back in her chair. What was going on with Maxwell Blackwood? The man she knew would never have abandoned his responsibilities like this. Back at the orphanage, Maxwell spent the day interacting with the children. He played soccer in the yard, clumsily at first, but improving with each minute. He helped in the art class, marveling at the creativity of the little ones. He even sat to listen to the stories that the youngest children invented. During a break, he found himself alone with Emily in the garden. The girl was drawing, her face a mask of concentration. "What are you drawing?" Maxwell asked, sitting beside her. Emily showed him the drawing. It was a portrait of Maxwell playing with the children. "It's you, Mr. Blackwood, but different." Maxwell looked at the drawing, feeling an emotion he couldn't name. "Different how?" he asked softly. "Happy," Emily replied simply. "You look happy here." Those words hit Maxwell like lightning. Happy? When was the last time someone had described him that way? When was the last time he had felt that way? "Emily," he began, his voice laden with emotion, "I want to thank you. You and your friends. You've taught me more in these days than any business book in my entire life." The girl smiled, a smile that lit up her whole face. "Does that mean you'll come visit us again?" Maxwell nodded, surprising himself with the sincerity of his response. "Yes, I'll come back. In fact, I have some ideas about how we can improve things here." As they talked, Director Thompson observed them from his office window. Never in his years of work had he seen such a dramatic transformation, not only in the children, who seemed happier and more hopeful, but in Maxwell Blackwood himself. As evening fell, Maxwell prepared to leave. The children gathered at the entrance to say goodbye to him, something they had never done before with any visitor. "Will you come back tomorrow, Mr. Blackwood?" asked Jason, hope in his voice. Maxwell looked at the expectant faces around him and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. A sense of purpose. "Yes, Jason, I'll come back tomorrow, and the day after. And every day I can." As he drove away in his car, Maxwell reflected on the events of the last few days. His phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from the office, but for the first time in his life, business wasn't his priority. In the passenger seat, he carried the drawing Emily had given him. He looked at it once more before starting the car. The image of himself, smiling and surrounded by children, was a reminder of the person he wanted to be, of the person who perhaps deep down he had always been. That night, in his luxurious penthouse, Maxwell couldn't sleep. His mind was full of ideas, plans to improve the lives of the children in the orphanage. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, truly useful. Meanwhile, at Hope and Life, Emily was also awake, looking at the stars from the dormitory window. She thought about Maxwell, how he had changed, how he had really seen them for the first time. "Do you think he'll come back tomorrow?" Sophie whispered from the bed next to her. Emily smiled in the darkness. "Yes," she replied with conviction. "I think he will." And so, as night enveloped the city, two hearts, one young and one reborn, filled with hope for tomorrow. The story of Maxwell Blackwood and the children of Hope and Life was just beginning, and it promises to be a story of transformation, second chances, and the incredible capacity of the human heart to change and grow. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon when Maxwell Blackwood was already awake, preparing for another day at Hope and Life Orphanage. However, this morning was different. His phone wouldn't stop ringing, and text messages were piling up on his screen. The board of directors of Blackwood Enterprises was demanding an emergency meeting. Maxwell sighed, looking at Emily's drawing that now adorned his nightstand. He knew he couldn't ignore his corporate responsibilities any longer, but he also didn't want to break his promise to the children. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Emily and her friends were anxiously waiting for Maxwell's arrival. The girl had spent the previous night drawing a special gift for him, a portrait of all the orphanage children together, with Maxwell in the center. "Do you think he'll like it?" Emily asked Sophie, showing her the drawing. Sophie smiled widely. "It's beautiful, Emily. I'm sure he'll love it." However, as the morning progressed, Maxwell's absence became increasingly noticeable. The children began to grow restless, and Emily couldn't help but feel a pang of worry in her heart. In the boardroom of Blackwood Enterprises, Maxwell faced a group of visibly upset executives. "Maxwell, what's going on?" asked Richard Carter, the chairman of the board. "You've been absent for days, ignoring calls and emails. We have crucial decisions to make." Maxwell took a deep breath before responding. "I've been busy with a personal project that I believe could greatly benefit our company." The executives exchanged skeptical looks. "A personal project?" questioned Amanda Hughes, the CFO. "Maxwell, we're in the middle of a multi-million-dollar merger. There's no time for personal projects." Maxwell stood up, his determination evident in every movement. "I ask you to listen to me. I believe we've lost sight of what really matters. Our company has the power to make a real change in people's lives, especially those who need it most." For the next hour, Maxwell told them about the orphanage, about Emily and the other children. He told them about the transformation he had experienced and how he believed the company could benefit from focusing more on social responsibility. At first, the executives listened skeptically, but as Maxwell spoke, something in his passion and conviction began to touch their hearts. "I propose we create a foundation," Maxwell concluded. "Our foundation that not only supports Hope and Life Orphanage, but also develops education and employment programs for vulnerable youth throughout the country." There was a moment of silence in the room. Finally, Richard spoke. "It's an ambitious idea, Maxwell, but how will this affect our financial results?" Maxwell smiled. "Think about the long-term impact. We improve lives, create opportunities, and at the same time enhance our corporate image. It's a win-win situation." After several hours of intense discussion, the board finally agreed to give Maxwell the opportunity to develop his proposal. He left the office feeling exhausted but optimistic. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, the day had passed with a mixture of disappointment and concern. Emily, sitting in the garden with her drawing in her hands, couldn't help but feel betrayed. "Maybe he had important things to do," Jason suggested, trying to cheer her up. "More important than us," Emily murmured, tears in her eyes. Just then, a familiar car pulled up in front of the orphanage. Maxwell got out hurriedly, his face a mixture of guilt and excitement. "Emily," he called, running towards her. "I'm so sorry. I had an unexpected meeting, but I came as soon as I could." The girl looked at him, torn between relief and disappointment. "We thought you weren't coming." Maxwell knelt in front of her, gently taking the drawing from her hands. "Emily, I want you to know something. You, all of you, are the most important thing to me now. And I have exciting news to share." Gradually, the children gathered around him, curious to hear what he had to say. Maxwell told them about the meeting, about the foundation he planned to create. "Does that mean you'll help more kids like us?" asked Jason, his eyes bright with excitement. Maxwell nodded, his smile full of determination. "Yes, Jason, we're going to help as many children as we can. But Hope and Life will always be special. You taught me to see with my heart, and that's something I'll never forget." Emily, moved by his words, finally showed him the drawing she had made. "It's for you," she said shyly. Maxwell looked at it, and for a moment he was speechless. The drawing showed all the orphanage children, smiling and happy with him in the center, as if he were part of a big family. "It's beautiful, Emily," he finally said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I'll treasure it always." That evening, as Maxwell was preparing to leave, Director Thompson stopped him. "Mr. Blackwood, I don't know how to thank you for everything you're doing." Maxwell smiled, looking towards the group of children saying goodbye to him from the entrance. "You don't have to thank me, Director. It's they who have given me much more than I could ever give them." As he drove back to his apartment, Maxwell reflected on the day's events. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles, both in the corporate world and in his new mission with the orphanage, but for the first time in a long time, he felt truly alive, truly motivated. In his penthouse, instead of reviewing financial reports as he used to do, Maxwell spent the night researching child aid programs and charitable foundation structures. Emily's drawing now occupied a place of honor on his desk, a constant reminder of his new purpose. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Emily was preparing for bed, her heart full of hope. "Do you think things are really going to change?" she whispered to Sophie. Sophie smiled in the darkness. "I think they already have, Emily, and it's thanks to you." And so, as night fell over New York City, two worlds that once seemed irreconcilable began to intertwine. The story of Maxwell Blackwood and the children of hope and life was far from over, but each day brought new promises, new challenges, and above all, new hope. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Life at Hope and Life Orphanage had changed dramatically since Maxwell Blackwood entered their lives. The foundation he had promised to create was taking shape, and the first fruits of his labor were beginning to show. One sunny Saturday morning, Maxwell arrived at the orphanage earlier than usual. He carried a folder full of papers and a smile he couldn't contain. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted as he entered the dining hall, where the children were having breakfast. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," the children responded in unison, their faces lighting up at the sight of him. Emily, who had developed a special bond with Maxwell, was the first to notice his enthusiasm. "Did something good happen, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked, her curiosity evident in her voice. Maxwell smiled even more broadly. "As a matter of fact, yes, Emily. I have wonderful news for all of you." Director Thompson, who had just entered the dining hall, approached with interest. "What's it about, Mr. Blackwood?" Maxwell looked around, making sure all the children and staff were present. Then, with a solemn but emotion-filled tone, he began to speak. "The foundation I promised you is now a reality. Starting today, Hope and Life Orphanage will have sufficient funds to improve all its facilities, expand its educational programs, and most importantly, ensure that each of you has access to the best possible education, even after you leave this place." A stunned silence fell over the room, quickly followed by an explosion of joy. The children shouted, hugged each other, and some even cried with happiness. Emily, with tears in her eyes, approached Maxwell and hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Thank you for keeping your promise." Maxwell, moved, returned the hug. "No, Emily. Thank you and all the children for teaching me the true meaning of life." Director Thompson, visibly emotional, shook Maxwell's hand. "This will change these children's lives forever. I don't know how to thank you." Maxwell shook his head. "There's nothing to thank me for. It's the right thing to do." As the day progressed, Maxwell shared more details about the foundation's plans. There would be new classrooms equipped with cutting-edge technology, an updated library, personalized tutoring programs, and even plans to help young people find employment or continue with higher education once they left the orphanage. While the children celebrated and made plans for the future, Maxwell found himself reflecting on his own journey. He remembered the cold and distant man he had been just a few months ago and marveled at how a simple act of kindness from a child had triggered such a profound transformation in his life. That afternoon, as the children played in the newly renovated courtyard, Maxwell sat on a bench with Emily. "Emily," he began, his voice soft and laden with emotion, "I want you to know that you've changed my life. You and all the children here have taught me more about love, compassion, and purpose than I learned in all my years in the business world." Emily looked at him with her big brown eyes. "You've changed our lives too, Mr. Blackwood. You've given us hope." Maxwell smiled, feeling a warmth in his heart that had become familiar in recent months. "You know, Emily, I've been thinking a lot lately. About life, about the future." The girl looked at him curiously. "And what have you been thinking about?" Maxwell took a deep breath before continuing. "I've been thinking about the possibility of adopting. Of forming a family." Emily's eyes widened. "Do you want to adopt one of us?" Maxwell nodded slowly. "Yes, I've been considering that possibility. But I want you to know that, regardless of what I decide, all of you are already like family to me." Emily remained silent for a moment, processing the information. Then, with wisdom beyond her years, she said, "Mr. Blackwood, I think you'd be a wonderful father. Any of us would be lucky to have you as a dad." Emily's words touched Maxwell deeply. At that moment, he knew his life had changed forever, and that the path he had chosen, though challenging, was the right one. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in warm hues, Maxwell watched the children playing, laughing, and enjoying a happiness that once seemed unattainable. He realized he had found something that money could never buy: a purpose, a family, and an unconditional love that filled every corner of his being. That night, as he prepared to leave, Maxwell looked once more at the drawing Emily had given him months ago. He now understood that this image wasn't just a drawing, but a vision of the future, a future he was building day by day with every smile, every hug, and every act of kindness. As he drove back to his apartment, Maxwell knew there were still many challenges ahead. Adoption would be a complicated process, and balancing his new life with his business responsibilities wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in his life, he felt completely at peace with the path he had chosen. At the orphanage, Emily was preparing for bed, her heart full of mixed emotions. The possibility that Maxwell might adopt one of them was exciting but also a little scary. However, as she looked around at the smiling faces of her friends, she knew that whatever happened, they would always be a family. And so, as night enveloped New York City, two souls, one young and one reborn, dreamed of the future. A future full of love, hope, and endless possibilities. The story of Maxwell Blackwood and the children of hope and life was far from over, but each chapter promised to be more beautiful than the last. Autumn had arrived in New York City, painting the trees in golden and reddish hues. At Hope and Life Orphanage, the children were preparing for the start of the new school year, excited about the opportunities that Maxwell Blackwood's foundation was providing them. However, for Maxwell, the past few months had been an emotional roller coaster. His decision to adopt had triggered a series of events that had led him to question himself deeply. On a crisp morning, Maxwell arrived at the orphanage with a tired but determined face. Director Thompson greeted him at the entrance, immediately noticing his worried expression. "Mr. Blackwood, is everything all right?" the director asked. Maxwell sighed deeply. "Things have gotten complicated, Robert. The company's board of directors isn't happy with the time I'm dedicating to the orphanage and the foundation. They're pressuring me to refocus exclusively on business." The director frowned, concerned. "I understand. What do you plan to do?" "I don't know yet," Maxwell admitted, "but I'm not going to abandon these children." "I can't." As they walked towards the courtyard where the children were playing, Maxwell noticed Emily sitting alone on a bench, drawing intently. He approached her, sitting down beside her. "Hello, Emily. What are you drawing?" he asked with a tired smile. Emily looked up, her eyes shining upon seeing Maxwell. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm drawing our future family." Maxwell looked at the drawing and felt his heart constrict. On the paper, Emily had drawn all the orphanage children, Director Thompson, and in the center, Maxwell, all holding hands and smiling. "It's beautiful, Emily," said Maxwell, his voice laden with emotion. "Can I ask you something?" Emily nodded, curious. "If you could choose, would you prefer that I adopt one of you or that I continue helping everyone at the orphanage?" The question took Emily by surprise. She remained silent for a moment, reflecting seriously. Finally, with a maturity that surprised Maxwell, she responded, "Mr. Blackwood, we all love you very much here. Any of us would be very happy if you adopted us. But—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I think you're already like a father to all of us. What you've done for the orphanage, for our future, it's as if you've adopted us all." Emily's words hit Maxwell like a revelation. Suddenly, everything became clear in his mind. "You're right, Emily," he said, hugging the girl. "You're already my family. All of you." That afternoon, Maxwell called a meeting with all the orphanage staff and children. With determination in his voice, he announced his decision. "I've decided to resign from my position as CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. From now on, I will dedicate all my time and resources to the foundation and this orphanage. I won't adopt just one of you because I already consider all of you my family." The news was received with a mixture of surprise, joy, and concern. Director Thompson was the first to speak. "Mr. Blackwood, are you sure about this? It's a very big decision." Maxwell nodded firmly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Robert. This is my place. This is my purpose." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Maxwell met with lawyers to transfer most of his company shares to the foundation, thus ensuring the financial future of the orphanage and the child aid programs he had initiated. The news of his resignation shook the American business world. Many criticized him, calling him crazy for abandoning the empire he had built. Others, however, praised him as an example of social responsibility and humanitarian commitment. A week after his announcement, Maxwell found himself in his old office at Blackwood Enterprises, packing his last belongings. Sarah, his faithful assistant, watched him with a mixture of sadness and admiration. "Are you really sure about this, Mr. Blackwood?" Sarah asked. Maxwell paused, looking out the window at the city sprawling below him. Then, with a serene smile, he replied, "More sure than ever, Sarah. For the first time in my life, I feel I'm doing exactly what I should be doing." As he left the building for the last time, Maxwell felt light, as if an enormous weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges and obstacles, but he also knew he had the love and support of his new family to face them. That night, back at the orphanage, Maxwell sat in the courtyard with Emily and the other children. As they looked at the stars and shared stories and laughter, Maxwell knew he had made the right decision. "Mr. Blackwood," Emily said softly, "are you happy now?" Maxwell looked around at the smiling faces of the children, at the orphanage building that now looked full of life and hope, and finally at Emily, the girl who had changed his life with a simple act of kindness. "Yes, Emily," he replied with a radiant smile, "I'm happier than I ever imagined I could be." And so, under the starry sky of New York City, a new family, united not by blood but by love and compassion, began the next chapter of their story. A story of second chances, of redemption, and of the transformative power of unconditional love. 5 years had passed since Maxwell Blackwood made the decision to dedicate his life to Hope and Life Orphanage. New York City was awakening to the first rays of the sun, and the orphanage, now transformed into a modern educational and child development center, was buzzing with activity. Maxwell, with a few more gray hairs but with an energy and smile that seemed never to fade, walked through the center's hallways, greeting the children and staff. His executive suit had been replaced by comfortable, practical clothing, more suitable for his new life. "Good morning, Dad Maxwell," a chorus of children's voices shouted as he passed by the dining hall. Maxwell smiled broadly. Although he hadn't legally adopted any of the children, they all considered him their father, and he saw them all as his children. Upon reaching his office, he found Emily waiting for him. The 10-year-old girl who had changed his life was now a beautiful 15-year-old young woman, with a maturity and compassion that went beyond her years. "Good morning, Emily," Maxwell greeted, giving her a hug. "Ready for the big day?" Emily nodded, a mixture of excitement and nervousness on her face. "Yes, although I'm a little nervous. What if they don't like my presentation?" Maxwell put his hands on Emily's shoulders, looking directly into her eyes. "You'll do amazingly. Your project to expand the educational programs to other communities is brilliant. I'm very proud of you." Today was a special day. Representatives from various international organizations and the U.S. government would be visiting the center to learn about the programs implemented by the Blackwood Foundation and consider replicating them in other parts of the country and the world. As Maxwell and Emily went over the final details of the presentation, a familiar figure appeared at the office door. It was Sarah, Maxwell's former assistant at Blackwood Enterprises, who now worked as a project coordinator for the foundation. "Maxwell, the guests are arriving," Sarah announced with a smile. Maxwell nodded, taking a deep breath. "Thank you, Sarah. We'll be there in a moment." When Sarah left, Maxwell turned to Emily. "You know, 5 years ago, I never would have imagined I'd be here doing this. You changed my life, Emily. All of you did." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "And you changed ours, Dad Maxwell. You gave us a home, a family, and a future." Together they left the office and headed to the auditorium. The place was full of people, NGO representatives, government officials, journalists, and of course, the children and staff of the center. Maxwell took the stage and, looking at the audience, began his speech. 5 years ago, I was a different man. I believed success was measured in numbers, in profits, in corporate power. But a small gesture of kindness from a brave little girl taught me I was wrong. She taught me that true success is measured in smiles, in transformed lives, in restored hope. As Maxwell spoke, before and after images of the orphanage were projected on the screen behind him. They showed not only the physical improvements of the place, but also the smiling faces of the children, their academic achievements, their artistic and sports talents flourishing. Today, I'm not here to talk about myself, but about these extraordinary children and the incredible team that has made this transformation possible. And especially, I want to introduce you to someone who embodies everything we've achieved here. With these words, Maxwell invited Emily to the stage. The young woman came up, nervous but determined, and began to present her project to expand the Foundation's educational programs. As Emily spoke, Maxwell watched her with paternal pride. He remembered the little girl who had offered him a drawing years ago and marveled at the strong and compassionate young woman she had become. At the end of the presentation, the audience burst into applause. The representatives of international organizations were visibly impressed, and several immediately approached to discuss implementing Emily's program in other countries. Later that day, as the sun was setting over New York City, Maxwell found himself in the center's courtyard, surrounded by the children. Some were playing, others reading, and others simply enjoying each other's company. Jason, one of the first children Maxwell had met at the orphanage, and who was now preparing to go to college, approached him. "Dad, Maxwell," Jason said, "do you ever regret leaving your old life?" Maxwell looked around at the happy faces of the children, at the building that was now a true home, and finally at Emily, who was helping one of the younger children with their homework. With a smile that lit up his entire face, Maxwell replied, "Not for a second, Jason. This is the life I was always meant to live. You are the family I was always meant to have." As night fell over Hope and Life Center, Maxwell Blackwood realized he had found something that all his previous money and power could never buy. A purpose, a family, and an unconditional love that filled every fiber of his being. And so, under the starry sky of New York City, the story of Maxwell Blackwood and the children of Hope and Life came to an end, but also to a new beginning. A beginning full of promises, of dreams to fulfill, and of a bright future for generations of children who, thanks to an act of kindness and a heart that dared to change, now had the opportunity to reach for the stars.